ideas about what ancient Rome was like. But odds are, many of those ideas are wrong. It's not your fault. You're a victim. A victim of pop culture. Because pop culture is full of misrepresentations of the ancient world. Today, we're debunking some misconceptions about ancient Romans and the world in which they lived. But first, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. Then jump down into the comments and tell us what ancient civilizations you want to hear more about next. Okay, fans of bread and or circuses, this one's for you. Historiography is the study of how history is researched and written, and one of its key lessons is that looks can be deceiving. During the Renaissance, people became fascinated by the art produced by the ancient Greeks and Romans, especially statues. These statues had originally been painted in a variety of shades and colors by their original creators. But by the Renaissance, all of these paints and dyes had chipped off due to wear and elemental exposure. Modern researchers have since used ultraviolet and infrared technology to analyze the ancient statues, examining layers of paints and coatings that remain invisible to the naked eye. Wonder if any of these artists draw that cool S we were all obsessed with in middle school. But the Renaissance artists, who took their technically incorrect inspiration from the Greeks and Romans, made their sculptures unpainted, giving us the pure white marble look we still associate with ancient sculptures today. Copying someone's homework incorrectly? Who isn't guilty of that crime? As many of these statues depict the ancient Romans wearing togas, this led to the widespread presumption that togas were everyday casual wear throughout the Roman Empire. But in fact, togas were not all that common. They were a bit like a tuxedo, the kind of formal wear donned for special occasions, denoting a person's significance in Roman society. Only full Roman citizens were even permitted to wear togas. So let's hope John Belushi had his citizenship paperwork in order before they filmed that iconic Animal House scene. To understand how so many misconceptions about the Romans came to be, it helps to look at how we know anything about ancient Rome. The Romans borrowed their view of history and its study from the Greeks, with a great focus on their own central place in the narrative. I guess we can forgive them for that. It is Roman history written by Romans, so it's going to be Roman-centric. Romans saw history not as a definitive, objective attempt to get at fact, but more of an ever-changing narrative rooted in the concerns of the present day. If a legitimate modern historian reimagines history from a present-day perspective, it's bad history. But in Roman times, it was good writing, which often meant writing to please an individual or group, such as the patron who hired you. What would Roman society have thought of Lin-Manuel Miranda? Let's take Rome's reputation as a society where public depravity and orgies were common. This is almost certainly not historically accurate. There are only a few accounts of group sex taken from any primary Roman sources, and when the subject does come up, it's usually cited as a distasteful or inappropriate act. The debauchery that did occur was probably exaggerated later by those who morally opposed it and by those who could market it. I mean, minutes from the Roman plebeian council versus good old-fashioned Roman orgies, you know which channel's going to get more subscribers. The Emperor Caligula, for example, is remembered today as a perverted, incestuous, and incompetent monster. Horror stories about his brutal reign of terror included watching his subjects get fatally tormented, turning the royal palace into a brothel, inviting a horse to serve as a consul in the Senate, and an array of other scandals and atrocities. If he were around today, he'd have a serious political career. Many of these accounts come from two historians who were contemporaries of Caligula, Philo and Seneca the Younger. Philo had to resent Seneca for getting that billing. These two writers would refer to Caligula's insanity, particularly after an unknown illness in the year 37 AD. This illness has led some to believe that Caligula was the victim of a mental illness that progressed throughout his reign. However, in Roman, and probably every culture, perversity and insanity were considered bad for public governance. But these kind of juicy tales tend to be embellished over time. So it may be possible what started as criticisms of Caligula's character became exaggerated for political or entertainment purposes, sort of like an ancient world precursor to The Daily Show, but entertaining. This doesn't mean we should dismiss historical accounts made by the Romans. In fact, there are pioneering scholars from that period. But there are contrasting narratives about every past, even in primary sources, and you have to be careful what you consider bona fide and what's fluff. Here's a tip. Don't look to Hollywood, like that 1979 film Caligula. Hey there, weird historians! Weird History and Surfshark are teaming up, and you should check it out if you want an easy to use, lightning fast. In a world first, a neurosurgeon in Australia has removed a worm found alive in a woman's brain. The creature measured around 8 centimeters or 3 inches, and it's understood to be the larva of an Australian native roundworm, not previously known to be a human parasite. It was discovered during a biopsy operation last summer. Details of the shock find have been revealed in a new article published by the experts involved. The 64-year-old patient had been admitted to hospital after experiencing forgetfulness and worsening depression over 3 months. Well, we can talk now to the neurosurgeon at Canberra Hospital who discovered that worm, Dr. Haripriya Bandi. Welcome to DW. Dr. Bundy, before we get to the significance of the worm, I'd like to first ask you to simply tell us about the moment of discovery. A shock, I take it.
Absolutely. Neurosurgery is exceptionally planned. It requires imaging beforehand. We very rarely find something that we're not expecting to find. And during this case, where we did an open biopsy of the skull, we opened up the normal tissues that as we usually do. We found abnormal brain. It looked a little bit discolored. My junior doctor had taken off some more minor samples, a few millimeters, and they didn't look particularly abnormal. But this poor woman had been suffering for so long, and I thought it was really important to get her an answer. So we followed the stereotactic map that we'd created beforehand and could actually dissect using fine dissectors where the abnormality was on the MRI beforehand. And we did that and found, oh gosh, it's behaving like a tumour, whatever this is. And then I used tumour holding forceps and lifted out something that definitely was not what I was expecting, a linear squiggling line, and my junior doctor said, is that an artery? Because that's what it looked like. And I said, it's not an artery, we're nowhere near any artery. And I noticed it was moving and immediately went, please just get it out of my forceps. Gosh, just get it out of the forceps. So we rapidly put it into a pathology pot, and it was a vigorously wiggling worm.
I see you have a model of the brain in your hand. Can you just hold that up a little higher and point to where you found that worm in the brain?
Yeah, apologies. This is just a rudimentary model of the cranium. And so basically this lesion that this lady had was found on the right-hand side. So her story was many months prior, and actually a year almost prior, she had lung lesions, liver lesions, lots of tests, nothing found. Okay. And she finally had these symptoms, and this is where we biopsied it through the skull using spine surgery where you can actually localize.
Now, this parasitic worm that you found is usually found in snakes. How did it end up in this woman's brain?
So this lady lives on the coast, so southeast coast of Australia, and she lives around a region, the lakes, where there is a green material called warrigal grass or warrigal green, similar very much to spinach. And she normally collects that, prepares it appropriately, washes them, and boils them and cooks them in her normal cooking. And we suspect that that might be the source where this has entered, because when we found this worm, it was red, wriggling, and a veterinary scientist who saw the picture of the worm immediately said that is a python worm, because it was a nematode, it's bright red, it has a very characteristic feature. And so we traced it back. Carpet snakes are very much endemic in that area. They travel over these warrigal green grasses and likely has deposited some feces on these grasses. This worm has been described between snakes as feces and within mammals and small rodents. Right. And that's a normal life cycle, but never human.
So you found it in the brain. You described removing it with your forceps. Can we assume that the worm had been moving around through the brain?
Yeah, we can, and we have imaging of it. So what happened was initially she had lots of lung symptoms, liver symptoms, abdominal pains, but then she progressed earlier last year to have more depressive symptoms, just not feeling herself and feeling out of control. Very frontal is what you'd say. And so the psychiatrist, before escalating her treatment, decided to do a CT scan. On the CT scan, you can clearly see something at the surface of the right frontal brain, her non-dominant lobe, because she's a right-handed lady. And on that surface, the CT initially, her following MRI showed it was changing. The subsequent MRI that was part of our planning showed that it was changing and moving. So this was changing and moving, but only in retrospect can you see, you can see that little squiggle of a line that now we can appreciate as a work, because there's no medical imaging that shows us anything similar. So it's easy in retrospect. You can see it moving.
And finally, what about the patient? You described her as having had symptoms of forgetfulness, depression. How's the patient doing?
So she, after suffering this really long illness with no answers and not getting any better, was really pleased to have an answer, to have a diagnosis, but more importantly than that, not just a diagnosis, but now potential treatments. So now we've been able to cure her of this parasite. While it's not been described in humans before, certainly treatments for parasites of this nature have been around for a long time. And the fantastic team at the Canberra Hospital, the infectious diseases doctors, hematologists, immunologists all came together and were able to provide an appropriate regime. And she's
this is when I find.
All right, Sean. Sean, so you have an interesting career. You work as a, what do you call it?
I'm a sexual assault nurse examiner, sometimes referred to as a forensic nurse examiner.
And this is in Northeast Indiana.
Yes.
And so you're working with people who have been assaulted.
Yes.
Probably all ages, right?
Yes, we provide the medical forensic exam for individuals that have been sexually assaulted. My youngest patient was 35 days old, so about this big. My oldest patient was 94 years old. So we do the entire lifespan as well as go to the morgue for a deceased individual if there is a suspicion that sexual assault occurred.
Wow. So you must see all kinds of stuff.
Indeed, I do.
Does it affect you emotionally? I mean, personally, you're
Yeah, I would be weird if it didn't. Yeah, it's.
You were telling me earlier you like to carry a gun with you everywhere you go.
Yeah, for protection. Yes, I do. Yeah, it affects me. It affects the people that care about me. It affects everyone. It's a stressful job. I mean, what you do, you're hearing things all day long. I hear them, see them, collect evidence, and it's hard. Vicarious trauma is real, and I feel like I'm pretty mentally tough, but there's times that we all just don't do so good, especially when we go to the morgue, especially when it's a kiddo.
Yeah. What got you into this field?
Well, ironically, I had never even heard of forensic nursing, and I had worked as a lactation educator for like 7 years for the WIC program. So I was all about women's health. I wanted to work in like labor and delivery when I got in nursing school. That's where I thought I would start and retire there. And so I got a job when I was in school, third shift. I went to school during the day and then worked third shift at the hospital. And I was in the nursery because I was low man on the totem pole. So I took care of the babies in the nursery. And I actually really enjoyed that a lot. And I knew I could bring the breastfeeding part of it into it to be able to help moms, you know, right after they've had the baby and stuff like that. So it was going to be a good way for me to get my foot in the door. And a couple months after I started there, I had one of the charge nurses come in and she said, Sean, we had a fetal demise and I'm going to need you to like take care of that. And I'm like, I knew what fetal meant and I knew what demise meant. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I never got that memo. That was not part of my job description at all that I can recall. And I just kind of stared at her and she's like, I've got 2 other moms in labor. I've got to go attend to them. I need you to clean this baby up, try to find some clothes that fit them and get like the keepsake photos for the parents if they decide they would want those later. And I kind of was just looking at her like waiting for some guidance. And she's like, I've got to go. She's like, you'll be fine, Sean. It's over there in the corner. And I'd been in this nursery for like 2 months. I never knew what this little room was off to the left. So I just she left. There was nothing like, hey, it's your first time. I'll like walk you through it. It was just like, shh. And I went into that room and it was like very dimly lit. And there was like a little table with like this little mound on the table with the receiving blanket over it. And there was a very distinct smell in there, which was the first thing I noticed. And I was like, well, I'm cleaning this baby up. So I like got a basin of warm water and brought it in a washcloth. I put some gloves on and I pulled back this little receiving blanket and it did not look like a baby to me. And baby was very tiny. And all I know is I had to do what I had to do. So I was told what to do. So I started doing it. So I started cleaning the baby off. And I just remember vividly the smell again was horrendous, but it was like the skin.
It's getting better. I'm feeling better today. Not coughing as much. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. No, I'll take sick leave. But I thought I'll just get the in and out out of the way. So, last time I didn't send them anything by Friday, and I knew I'll get it. It's messy. Yeah, he's cute. So, yeah, yeah, the mentoring, yeah. It sounds very similar to the design is very similar to the child education one. I'm just very well written protocol. You've got most of it, and people help you with it. So I'm not sure if I mean the two ladies technically had that classes is mentioned to me that they call it patent on, but not that. Yeah. It was submitted on Wednesday. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm happy with that. I just need to let them know that this is going to continue. There's the thing was just like, they need to do this, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, hey, just check and let you know. But you know, that's, so, it is, oh, okay. All right. I forwarded this email to you. I said, hey, I've got one more out. I just wanted to check with the plan and come back to you. I have one more thing to do. Yeah. So for last, if that's only one application that is responsive. Lori, another one, the applications really in final entry. That one, Lori, she asked to for it to go back to the, really after our session. So, and I sent that to them and they, it's in the, I did, it's in the email I sent you. But I thought, there's some parts we could, and it's only 5 pages now. I don't think it's too lengthy for like I did extract from a guide, I'll copy from the 4 pages and reference them with. Yeah. Oh, this is not original. That's so weird. I feel like I saved the version and then like it's different from the original. Okay, I'll take out but it's very similar to the one that I have. I saved it, but I did keep the yellow stuff because I would love to talk to you about it. So okay. Yeah, definitely need to send you the latest version. I'll do the. All right, cool. Yeah, and that's one more. I'll do that. But Sherry, if you need help today, let me know. I don't do too bad at work. Really. Um, so yeah, just let me know. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Yeah, should be so many. I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you know, the demographic. I'll give the highlights because I feel like there's parts I like more like I'm not sure about those, whether we should keep it in there or remove them. So just so that you know, and then the rest of the document I think you can keep them. So yeah, I'll send that to you. The one in ShareDrive, can I send you the ShareDrive link where I save this document? Because every time I drag it into the email, just comes out, you know, okay, I'll send you the link on it and I'll share that for that. Yeah, and of course, I'll leave it in office. Yeah, I'll send it later. Bye.
Off of the baby, and I was like, well, what, I'm going to take it down to the muscle? Like, I was like, this is like not something I can do. And I don't even really remember the rest of doing that, other than I did it. I got it done. I did it. I got off work. I went home. I drove back home, got my kids off to school, and had to leave and drive 45 minutes up to where I went to school. And I went to my classes. I acted normal, I guess. And on my way home, as soon as I got in the car, it was like the floodgates opened up. And I was just like, what the heck? I hadn't even had time to process it at that point. And I was just like, I can't believe I had to do that. And then I felt selfish that I felt like that, because I'm like, I'm worried about what I had to do when there's parents that just lost their baby. And it was like a lot of weird emotions that I had not had about anything remotely like that up to that point. And I'm like, this can't happen very much. Surely if I stay in this department, I am not going to have to worry about doing that, hopefully ever again. Well, that was not the case. So that happened a few more times. I know this is a long way about getting to the question you asked. But the irony lies in when I left that job. So I had to do that, I think, at least 4 or 5 more times with the fetal demise. And I finally, just one night, I was like, I can't do this. I mean, I'm tough, but my psyche, I was in nursing school. I was under a lot of stress. I was like, I can't do this. So my boss worked days. So when she got there, I kind of got her attention, and I went into her office and I said, everyone here knows I'm not a wuss, because I'm very tough and I don't ever want to appear weak, and not that there's anything wrong with that. But and I said to her, I can't do this. Like, more power to the people that can. I have a lot of I don't even know the word. I'll give them a lot of credit for the people that can do that, but I can't. I cannot hold and move dead babies and take photos of them. I can't. Well, ironically, at this point in my life, that is one of the things that I have to do in a much different location, under much different circumstances. And now, when I look back, those were horrible circumstances, obviously. That's supposed to be the happy place in the hospital, not where people are going home empty-handed. But what I do now is when I go to the morgue and it's a little child and little babies, I am touching them and moving them and collecting evidence and taking photos. So never would have I imagined at that point, when I absolutely thought I can't do this, I would be doing it and under what I have to say are worse circumstances, because not all of the kids that we see at the morgue have died at the hands of their abuser, but some of them definitely have. And that involves things where I'm seeing vaginal injury, anal injury, ruptured spleen, subdural hematomas, bleeding from head to toe, bruising from head to toe. And the tiniest body bags you've ever seen, which is very disconcerting, obviously. So that's only one part of my job. Most of the patients I see are alive and going through a lot themselves, obviously, by the time they get to me. And we provide that medical forensic component. But we also, offer medications for sexually transmitted infections. We provide them with referrals for counseling services, follow-up to get more testing, HIV prophylaxis, all that kind of stuff that we don't have available in-house. So I will say this, and some people might disagree, but more important than anything that I can do as far as evidence collection, all of those things, the way that I treat people when they come is by far what I do that's the most important thing. No one's coming to us for a good reason, ever. And anyone that walks through the door has suffered something horrible. Sometimes they can't remember because of drugs and alcohol being involved, but they have, and your body keeps score. And I know that the way I treat people has an impact, and it can improve the outcome for them by being treated with respect and dignity right after something like that happens. I still don't think I answered your original question of how I got into it, okay? So when I was in nursing school, after that whole the field of my stuff, I was in a forensics class, and I'd taken a few forensics classes and psych classes, stuff like that. And we had a speaker come in, and she actually works where I work now. And she came to talk to us about forensic nursing. And I'm like, I could totally do this job. I'm very methodical, I'm detail oriented, and I had never heard of forensic nursing. I'd heard of rape kits because a lot of people hear that terminology. I don't think I've ever said that. Unless I'm saying you may know it as, or, referred to as a rape kit. You see it on TV, you hear about it that way. And really that is what we collect. We have a box and, evidence is put into the box. Sometimes we have to bag other evidence up. But she came and talked to us about that, and I listened, and I'm like, I think I could do that. So I waited outside of the classroom, and when she came out, I said, hey, I really think forensic nursing is something I would be interested in. And she was like, little did I know at that time how much people tell us that. Because now that I've been there for a long time, you hear it. I just heard it at the pool yesterday. And, oh, what a cool job. I would love that job. And I'm like, yeah, right. You have no idea. You want to be on call all the time, have no real personal life, and carry everyone's baggage along with you. And I just kind of smile, which is what my coworker did that day. So she said, well, after you graduate, hit us up and maybe we'll have something for you. And she was being genuine, but I could tell it was kind of like, yeah, right. So it was only like a week or two later, I was on our university website, which I never get on. I don't know why I was on there. I have no idea, other than maybe that was just, I was supposed to be on there. So it said pediatric assistant, and it had listed the same place where the lady came to speak to us. And I was like, it had no job description, anything like that. So I went ahead and made a phone call. They had me come in for an interview, and then they hired me. And it was very interesting. I was an assistant, so I didn't do anything besides, it was pediatric assistant. So it was all the child population. So it was 14 and under back then. So that was my first taste of listening to little children tell us how they had been abused. Some of them thought it was normal because that's all they knew. Some kids know, they will tell you, they will talk about smells. They will talk about how things made them feel. And that was like, that was difficult. It wasn't easy. And again, I'm like, why do I get into this kind of like job? Like, what the heck? But I knew that I could have a huge impact there. And I saw the nurses and what an impact they had on the patients. And so I continued. And I will say, to hire people in school as a pediatric assistant was a good job, very smart of them, because it would be the perfect weed out process. Because if you couldn't hack it doing that before you are able to actually collect evidence and do all that, you're not gonna make it there. So I did make it there. And then I went on to get finish my degree. And then I went through all the training to become a sexual assault nurse examiner. And then the preceptorship. So initially you have like a education portion, and then your preceptorship is where you follow the experiencing. So I did that for the adult adolescent population, and then I did that for the pediatric population. So all in all, that takes about 1.5 years. And I was doing other jobs while I was doing that. So I was doing some hospice, some long-term care, pediatric nurse. I was busy working like every weekend, and a lot. I was working a lot, knowing that at some point I would only work where I'm working now. Again, the deeper you get into it, the more difficult it becomes, because it's just more baggage every day. In some cases, hits you harder than others. And I will say this, one of your interviews with Eve from Connecticut, she talked about afterwards, and her stuff was so horrendous, I can't even imagine. But she talked about how 99% of the cops were really good, because we work with law enforcement, DCS, all these people, and get to know them because we work around them so often. And when she said that, how that one cop acted with her in the car, it ticked me off. Then she went on to say how crappy the nurse was that collected her evidence. And that irritated me to no end. And I will say this, forensic nurses are a different breed, and they're very passionate about what they do. And if I had to, she was probably an ER nurse that it was already taking care of 2 or 3 patients. I'm not justifying her behavior, because I know we all have baggage, but when you start taking care of your patients, you have to be there for them. You can't bring your baggage into a lot of jobs, but nursing especially. And how harmful that was to her, and how it hurt her by being treated the way she was by that nurse. Because I think she was kind of like, here, I just get on shift, and this is the first thing I have to do. I'm thinking, man, I got to get up in the middle of the night all the time to come do these cases. And I would never think of complaining to a victim of sexual assault. Well, so I feel like this needs to be some redemption for sexual assault nurse examiners. Again, I think it was probably an ER nurse that was really busy.
This was thrown on her.
Yeah. And because a lot of times they're asking people to do it that aren't trained to do it, or they've only done a couple. In some states, you open this box up and it's got like instructions that could take you an hour to read. I've never read the instructions in there. We don't need to. That's part of what we learn in forensic nursing, because those instructions mean nothing when it's based on the disclosures that are made or not made. Because, if I have a kid in the morgue that's deceased, can he tell me what happened, or can she tell me what happened? No. So I have to go based on, I don't know what happened, so I am going to do absolutely as many swabs and collect as much evidence as I can.
And you're asking questions.
When they're alive, yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like what you do is a hybrid of law enforcement and nursing.
Well, there's a distinct difference only because I'm the medical component and they are part of all the investigatory stuff. So every question I ask, really, and we have to make that differentiation because of testifying and stuff like that, because we don't work for law enforcement, we don't work for Department of Child Services. All of my documentation becomes part of their investigation. So the questions that I ask, I'm really asking them more for, it guides the forensic exam. So if they can't remember something again, or they don't know, then I'm collecting virtually everything I can. If they can specify things that happen, I don't want to have to, would I want to have to do anything below the waist on somebody that's already been traumatized that nothing happened down there? And that's what some states will have nurses do. We don't need to do, we can do a head-to-toe exam, but there's no reason for me to collect evidence from a female sex organ when everything happened orally or something like that. Because especially for a child, they're not going to understand why you're doing any of that. So yeah, the exam itself is totally guided by that. So are the medications that we offer, all of that type of thing. And I will say, I treat my patients with such compassion, but I'm a straight shooter. I'm super easy to get along with. And they feel comfortable because luckily, I'm very blessed that I can build rapport with people pretty quickly, or it would make my job very difficult, I think. But I almost always make people laugh while they're there at some point because I'm very sarcastic too. And I know who to do that in front of and not. You figure that out very quickly.
Sometimes adding a little levity, some humor to the situation, because you're dealing with the most horrific, traumatic things you can imagine. You know, when somebody's like, I get crap sometimes on these interviews where I'm almost laughing at the absurdity of some story that somebody's telling. Not laughing at that.
No, when I hear you laugh, it's the same time I'm laughing when I watch your video.
Yeah, because it's like, as somebody who's dealing with this stuff all the time, that's how you deal with it.
Yeah.
Because to not do that, you just break down and cry.
Well, absolutely. And the kids too. They're like, "You're funny." I'm like, well, I'm glad I can make you laugh. And that's when they're sitting there telling me things like, because I will always ask a kid, did anyone ever tell you not to tell anyone? Because that's really important. You can get a lot of perspective from asking that question. And you hear some horrendous things. You hear like, well, yeah, my dad said not to say anything or he would kill me and my mom and the dog. Okay. I understand why you didn't say anything. Because when I talk to a kid, I've never treated even the littlest kids like babies. I never talked to my 3 kids like babies when they were little. And I think that's why I had kids that were very mature and reading when they were 4 and stuff like that, because I wanted them to have fun and have a childhood, but at the same time, I don't know. I just wanted them to be not walking around like, oh, I need this, or oh, I can't. I'm whining. I don't care for that.
How much of the sexual assault you see comes from? Is it 100% from men, or is it something?
Oh, absolutely not. Nope. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say most of the perpetrators are men, but some of the worst perpetrators and accomplices I know are female.
Really?
Yeah, because we all know there's crappy parents out there. I was very abundantly blessed to have amazing parents, but there's a lot of crappy parents who don't protect their kids. And that's something that's really hard for me to listen to when I have a kid tell me, well, I told my mom and she didn't believe me, like 2 years prior. And this has continued to happen. And there's times when I'm really tired, I get emotional. Not like not like that, but just people can tell when you're kind of getting emotional. And I've had kids before, like say I've gotten 3 hours sleep in 3 days. They tend to hit you harder when you hear something really sad. which is most of what I hear. But these little kids, they're looking into your face and they're asking to go home with you because they feel safe already. Because I have boundaries. I am a structured person. I don't let these kids bounce off the walls and act a fool when they're there. I'll give them a little bit of leeway. And then I'm like, now you're going to sit here. We're going to talk about that. You can go, honey. You don't have to be here because everyone has a choice. The adults and the kids. We don't do anything that people don't want us to do there. Not that people are like, oh, yeah, I get to go over there and have evidence collected. But at the same time, I let everyone know I'm really proud of you for coming here. You're very brave to come see me. And I'm so happy I'm the nurse that gets to take care of you. And anything that you don't want to do, you don't have to do when you're here. You don't have to have photos. Even if mommy and daddy say yes, you're the boss. That's scary sometimes, telling a little kid they're the boss. But I want them to know they have control over that situation because they absolutely had no control over what happened to them. So the answers that we get from that, like, yeah, telling mom she didn't believe me, or mom was a part of the sexual abuse, or mom was making their kid do something to a stepdad, or let's do this and video it and it's put online. Or, I mean, we hear everything. And one of those times when I was really tired and a kid, I mean, Lord knows, because we hear so many things, what they were saying to me, it was a little boy, I just remember that, but my eyes just filled up with tears. I was just like, I can't handle this. I already had so many patients in a very short period of time. And this kid just broke my heart. And I remember I looked at him and I'm like, oh no, because I could feel it. Like I could feel I was starting to, like, my eyes filled up, and he was noticed it immediately. And he looked at me and he's like, and here's this kid who was just sexually assaulted and had been numerous times. And he said, are you okay? I almost lost it when he asked me, because I'm like, seriously? And I said, no, actually, I'm not really, because I'm sorry that no one protected you. And that's, with the kids, that's the hardest, because I can't fathom. I was such a protective mom. And if you ask my kids, I'm far too protective mom, because you're supposed to protect your kids. And that kid was just like, right, but you're taking really good care of me. And I'm like, right, because I care about you. And I know that when we provide that initial care to them, even though it had been happening for a long time, one of the other things I say is, when I first meet them, I'm kind of jumping around, but when I first meet a family, let's just act like they're kids at that point, I'll tell the kid and the parents, I used to say, I will treat you just like you're my own family. Then I realized a lot of families don't treat their kids good. And most of them understood what I meant because they could tell the sincerity in my voice. But at the same time, I had to rethink that. Because one time I joked, I said, and I treat my family good, because they looked kind of, and then I went, ooh, the fact that I even said that was weird too. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. So what I started saying, and what I've been saying for years and years, it's along the same lines. But I say, my name is Sean. I'm the forensic nurse examiner, and I am going to treat your kiddo just exactly how I would want my own family treated. Is it kind of the same? And are there crappy people who might not want their kid treated well? I don't understand that. Again, I feel like it's safer when I say that, because some people didn't have a good mom or dad, and they get what I'm saying. My main thing is telling them how brave they are, especially the kids. And I also say, did anyone tell you that this isn't your fault? And they just stare at me. And just recently, I had a little boy say, are you going to be mad at anything I tell you? And I looked at him and I was like, no. And he goes, well, mommy and daddy were mad. And I said, honey, because I had already met his parents, very appropriate, good people. Not that people can't seem good that aren't, but. And I said, I'm a mom and I'm a grandma. And most of us want to protect the people that we love. And because somebody did something to you that they shouldn't have, mommy and daddy are upset, because sometimes we feel like we should have been able to protect you, or we're just upset at the person that did this, or there's a lot of things. And I said, so you're seeing a lot of emotions in mom and dad right now. anger, maybe saying words you're not used to hearing. They say they want to go kill this person, all kinds of things, but they're not mad at you. They're mad about what happened, but they're not mad at you, and they don't blame you. And that's when I found out that some people do blame their kids. Because I had a little girl one time that said, Mommy said it was my fault because of the nightgown that I was wearing, and she was 5. So I'm like, well, no, it was not your fault. It absolutely was not your fault. And I'm sorry that that was said to you, because it was this person's fault, and they did something that was really bad. And I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Kids are much more resilient. Those are the ones that impact me the most. I'm not saying every sexual assault that I deal with doesn't impact me, but those like are a gut punch, the kids, when they're just sitting here telling you that stuff, especially when you know that it's gone on for long periods of time. I mean, your videos are the prime example. Your interviews that I've seen. I don't know if you've heard of the ACE scoring system, but the ACEs, they're the adverse childhood experiences that have happened to some of the people in your videos. It's amazing that they're alive, a lot of them, because
That's why so many are on drugs.
Yeah, exactly. The higher your ACE score, and I had a couple, but these people have a ton. And when I literally will calculate their ACE score sometimes while I'm sitting there watching them, because it's so hard to listen. Your videos are not easy to listen to. I'm sure you know that. But I appreciate you having them there, because so many people stick their head in the sand and purposely don't make themselves aware of what's going on. And that's hurtful. I mean, my daughter and I see homeless people all the time when we're walking down by the river. And just having eye contact with people makes a huge difference. We wonder why people feel like they have no worth. And then people can't even look them in the eye. And I used to, be like, oh, they're going to ask me for money, but I would still always say hi and, how are you or whatever. And you do. And when I'm on the trail, I don't have money with me. I have nothing besides, some like self-preservation weapons on us sometimes. Yeah. No, we have other things. But because, you have to be safe. But the homeless people have not been the people that I've ever been that scared of. There's been other people that have made us. I heard my daughter switchblade one time, chink, like in 2 seconds it was out, and I was like, "Good for you. You are definitely my daughter." And she was right on it, because my hearing is not that great the older I get, and she heard something and she had it out in 2 seconds. But back to giving people dignity and showing them their self-worth is the biggest part of my job, and that's what I would want to convey. I wish I could change things for people. I can't, especially by the time they get to me at my job. I wish I could change things. I wish I had a magic wand and could take it all away. I can't, but what I can do is treat people well. And I was brought up in a Christian home, and I made a lot of mistakes growing up. And but I always knew I had unconditional love at home, and that's very different from a lot of the people that you interview. And sometimes I think I almost feel guilty that I had such an amazing family, and then I'm like, no, I'm so blessed that I had that. I wish more people had that, because the outcomes would be so much different. I know some of the stuff that happened to me, but because I had that firm foundation at home, probably a lot of people sitting on the sidelines praying for me from the time I was little up till right now, because my parents are probably nervous about me being here. Because I thought when you first called, I thought it was like AI, like artificial, like until I was like, this could not be him. And I asked my daughter, do you think it's AI? What if it's like a human trafficking ring? Obviously, I have trust issues from the job I do.
Yes.
I mean, even like coming up to this room, I knew that was you. I knew it looked like you, but I was still like, oh my God. Another reason my brother was here. So, yeah, trust issues, baggage.
You see the worst of the worst.
We do, and whatever I think that I've seen, I can't see something worse or hear something stranger or worse. Sure enough, I get proven wrong. Many times I get proven wrong in that.
What's the worst thing you've seen?
The worst thing I see, I have to be obviously careful because of HIPAA. By far, dead children. that died at the hands of their abuser. Now, I will say that there's times that I've thought, as horrendous as that was, because there's been some really bad ones, I never had to hear what happened. And sometimes for me, I'm an overthinker. I can't even, it's a toss-up between which one's worse. Obviously, a dead child is horrendous. But the kids that are able to tell me everything too is, then I know, I have full knowledge of what happened. And I just wonder, and like, I just literally will pray for these kids when they leave. Like,
it's got to be so difficult to let the kid go. He's going back to his family, right?
yeah, and sometimes the perpetrator, I mean, DCS, Department of Child Services, will always be involved if it's anyone under 18.
Sometimes separate them.
Yeah, and I know that, again, they have a very high ACE score right away in life. And, you know, unfortunately, even foster families, I've taken care of a lot of foster kids who were sexually assaulted in foster homes because of either other foster kids or foster parents. I mean, you know, I am not like my dad. I love my dad to death, but he's changed a lot over time. I think he always wanted to think the best about people and that people were good. And there are a lot of good people. There are. You have to find them, but they're out there. But there's so many foster parents that it would be hard to have foster kids, even when you're doing the best, you know, you're awesome people. You want the best for people. I don't even know how you keep an eye on a kid that's been sexually assaulted, because unfortunately they can also become the next perpetrator, which is scary too. But we've had to send kids back into homes where I didn't feel like they felt safe, because that's not my choice. I don't get to make that choice. And I have a lot of respect for Department of Child Services because I see what they have to deal with. They're dealing with a lot of the same things we are. And they have to make scary choices sometimes. And you're trusting that a mom's going to get rid of that stepdad or their boyfriend that's been molesting their children. But the system's not always going to know if they allow those people back in the house. So I really can't. I know which one was the hardest on me emotionally, and it was a dead kid in the morgue that was literally every inch of that kid had injury, and having it in the worst places, because anytime it's anal, vaginal, anything. And because I do overthink and obsess about things like that sometimes, all I could think about was what was the last few minutes of that kid's life like, you know? And that I just hope that when maybe they got hit in the head first, that they were out at that point, that they died quickly. I don't know. It's really weird because like two of us usually always go to the morgue. And my coworker, it seems like her and I usually are stuck together going those same days. And she had a kid about that age, that same age. And it was very difficult on her, very difficult. And we're both talkers. And I remember on the way back after we left that day, and we had really good law enforcement there that day that kind of warned us what we were in for, that it wasn't just like a kid that looks like they're sleeping. It was much worse than that. And I don't think we spoke. And like I said, we're both talkers. I don't think we spoke one word the whole way back to work. And then when we get there, you're not done at that point. I mean, you think, oh God, you should be able to like decompress, like do whatever, but no, you immediately go because you have to dry the evidence, package the evidence, start your documentation. And I think on that one, I had at least 5 hours just in charting the injury, because we chart everything by hand. So you're like looking at the photos again, you know, for the next so it was like, now that being said, that day normally I can go home and I'm weird, I'm acting a little weird, I feel like you're just like in this weird space. But it's usually a couple days after I do those where it just like, yeah, just like that day when I was driving home. And yeah, and that's why literally, and who in their right mind, would be watching your videos to relax, because I do other things. I mean, I listen to music, I listen to podcasts, I play pickleball, I swim, I paint rocks and hide them around for people to find. And actually I painted you one, but I left it downstairs because I was stressed. And just to like, I have to do things that bring me joy. and can take me out of that space when I get in a funk because of one of those cases. But that same case I think I had 5 more exams in the next 2 days because I was on call that weekend. So I didn't process it till Monday, and Monday was not a good day. I had that day off, and I was just like, what in the heck even? Like, what is going on? That one has stuck with me as far as visually the most, because I see it. I could describe it to a T right now. But that's the visual part of it. The audio part of it, there's stuff that I've heard that I can never unhear. Never unhear. Stuff that I see that I can't unsee. Stuff that I hear that I will never unhear.
You've been doing this job for 20 years?
13.
How have those 13 years changed you?
I was very untrusting prior to this job, so changed me.
You're aware now of how evil the world is sometimes.
I knew that before. But
Like doing these interviews, I'm shocked at how many people have been through sexual abuse.
well, and I think that that's kind of why, because somehow yours was suggested to me. I don't even know what that meant, but somehow it was suggested to me, and I started watching them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these are like my patients. And these are like people who are self-medicating. And, when we talked about the ACEs before, the higher the score you have, the more that you answer yes to, it increases your risk for chronic health problems, suicide attempts, mental health issues. Yeah. Sexual assault is such a horrible thing, but at the same time, I want people to have hope, and I don't want them to feel like that they are defined by what has happened to them. And I think, again, that's part of what I want to do in my job. I want people to have hope when they leave. And I always, after the exams are over, even the youngest kids, I'll be like, is that as bad as you thought it would be? Because they have people going, well, you're going to re-traumatize my kid. Or, oh my God, I watched this on Law and Order SVU, and it's horrible. And I'm like, I'm not telling you this will be easy, but I can assure you that I'm the perfect person to take care of you today. And you will feel empowered when you leave here. I don't know how you're going to feel 24 hours from now. I have no control over that. But while you're here, you will feel safe. You will feel listened to. You will know that you had good care provided. And you will know that there's something different about me. And you won't know what that is, but you'll know.
Would you say your job is fulfilling and rewarding?
It's fulfilling. It's absolutely fulfilling. It's just hard.
Yeah.
And like, there's days, literally, I'm like, why am I doing this? Because I can help people. And that's what I want to do. And there's the days I'm the most frustrated because it can be a very toxic environment. Because again, there's no one coming there for a happy reason. I do a lot of teaching and educating, and those are the only people walking through our doors that it's happy because they're coming to learn about it, which is not happy for them usually. But I love educating, and it's kind of healing as well to do that. So people know more about it and they're more aware.
What do you think the solution is to the amount of sexual abuse we see?
As negative as it sounds, there is none. It's always been happening.
I mean, the good parenting that you described.
It's going to continue, right? But I had good parents, and it happened to me.
Yeah, no, but more good parenting would probably put a big dent in it all.
Yeah, it's pornography. People don't like to listen to this or hear this. It's not a popular thing, but the accessibility of pornography now. And the things that little kids are seeing, because I asked my patients, so you're only 7, and some of these things were happening with you and another child. Did you see this from someone? Is it something you saw on TV, in a movie, in a picture, in a video? Did you walk in on your parents? Like, did something happen to you previously? Because we kind of want to we want to make sure that kid is also, we know that some of the child perpetrators are being perped on as we speak. So we're always trying to back it up to be like, okay, this kid did something horrible. what happened to that kid? And then you're kind of like moving back to try to find out how many kids are being affected in this group and trying to get everybody in for forensic interviews. And the accessibility of pornography and people having their little phones all the time. And these kids that have, my kids, if they were little, would never have any of these smartphones, or there would be so much blockage on it. It wouldn't even, there would be no point. They might as well have a flip phone. And there are kids who know how to get online and find all of that. And I know there's just some legislation that came through recently in a couple states about trying to minimize the accessibility and age restrictions, and certain entities that they make a lot of money off of that being really upset about that. I feel like everyone should think that's the messed up thing, is trying to, well, there's always going to be ways to get around things. We do know that, but why not have it in place? Can we minimize? Yeah. Why do we want kids to see these kind of things? It's bad enough that stuff is happening to them, but they're seeing it and they want to act some of the things out. So it's not just kids that have been perped on, it's kids that have seen these things and they end up perpetrating. And it's just, I wish I could say that there's a solution to getting rid of sexual assault, but it'll never happen. But the outcomes can be changed to where they at least have a better chance of a positive outcome. A lot of your videos that I've watched in the interviews, I don't talk about faith. I'm not going to go on and on about it now because that's not the way I roll. I care. But I think people seeing you're different sometimes. You can plant a seed without saying things. But most of the people in your videos that have had a better outcome, even after some real crap, like Johnny, the gang member that now is like working in jail ministry and stuff like that, I think I'm safe to say, you can agree or disagree, that most of the people that have had a positive outcome have said something about God or Jesus. And I believe that, because our worth is never going to be, self-worth is the huge thing with the population that you video most of the time and interview. Your worth is never going to be determined by where you lay your head at night, how much money you have, the atrocities that have happened to you, how many friends you have, what kind of shoes you're wearing. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that all of us are worthy in God's eyes, and that every one of us is his masterpiece. And if everyone knew that, and I know people say, how could these horrible things happen to people if there's a God? Well, there's a lot of horrible people. And I don't regret anything that happened to me in my past. Some choices I've made, I absolutely have some regrets about that. But as far as the things that happened to me when I was younger, that my parents had absolutely no control over, nor did I. I don't regret it. I absolutely don't. Because while that is not the reason that I went into forensic nursing, it has nothing to do with it. It did not enter into it one bit. Mine was more because I'm methodical and detail-oriented and all those kind of things. I thought I would be fit for that job. And I knew I cared about people, because that's what was modeled by my parents. They cared. They were consistent. They were punctual, which you obviously know I am since I got here 2 hours early. But they lived out their faith every day.
I'm the least religious person you'll ever meet, but I agree with you 100%.
That's nice to know. And I was really proud of Johnny in that video, because he was very bold in his faith. And I hadn't watched his. And when I watched some of your interviews, I was like, if I say anything, you might just edit it out. And so I was overthinking, because that's what I do best, everything that I was going to say. And when I saw that one, I felt better, because I knew you not only allowed it, you had him come back a second time, because I saw how many people watched his and how many positive comments were on his. And we all know there's a lot of haters, because my daughter's like, if this thing gets out there, don't look at the comments, because you overthink everything, and you'll be like, what? She's right. Because a lot of people don't want to hear those things. Like, some people might think it's terrible I said dead baby. I know that sounds very slang and bad because it's a deceased child. But that's literally what I thought that day. I cannot take care of dead babies. I can't do this. So I'm not saying it disrespectfully. I know it doesn't sound politically correct. I know I probably worry about that too much because nowadays everybody gets like, oh gosh, everything comes at you now if you say one wrong thing. And I shouldn't care, but I do. Anyway, I work with a lot of law enforcement, child protective services, therapists. Not really work right beside them always, but we have somewhat kind of the same job at the end of the day. And there's a lot of us that are in healing fields that we went into because we wanted to be a part of healing people and serving people and helping. It's more actually helping than healing. And a lot of those people that I've come into contact with over the years were people who suffered at the hands of abusers as well. And I just have to think that that's also something we do for us, which sounds selfish. Again, that's never why I went into the field I'm in. But it helps us too. Anybody that knows when you feel the crappiest and the most down, that's why I paint rocks, and it sounds so stupid. I get them when I'm up in Alaska, these perfect little smooth rocks, and I paint things on them and I hide them, and then people post them online because there's groups all over the world that do this. And it's such a stupid little simple thing. And there's people that will post, I found this rock on the day my mom died. And it's like, that just sounds so dumb, but it means something to people. And if I can do that, and if all of the other people that I know who are in these fields can do that, and just anyone, like I said, eye contact with a homeless person walking down the street. I heard a saying, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it was something along the lines of the final stage of healing is when you use what happened to you to help other people. And any day that we can do that, it's a good day. It's a really good day.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for inviting me.